Good evening and welcome to the Halton Hills Lecture Series. My name is Natalie Hott and I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Halton Hills Public Library. It is my pleasure to welcome you this evening. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are joining from communities across North America and recognize that we are all residing in different treaty territories. I am joining this evening from the Halton Hills Public Library, which is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation on Treaty 19. Treaty 19 was agreed upon by the Mississaugas of the Credit and the British Crown in 1818. We recognize this land as being the home and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat. As a note before we begin tonight's lecture, we will be recording the session and making it available on our YouTube channel shortly. Bernie and Rico will also be accepting questions at the end of tonight's presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to share them using the chat function located at the bottom of the screen if you are on a computer, or in one of your submenus if you are using a phone or tablet. When submitting your questions, please make sure that you have your chat function set to share the question with everyone instead of with a particular individual. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's guests. Bernie Saunders played in the NHL for 2 seasons as a right winger with the Quebec Nordiques. He was only the 5th Black player in the NHL. Bernie quit hockey in his 20s to pursue a successful career in pharmaceuticals. A dual citizen of Canada and the US, he lives in South Carolina. Bernie joins us tonight to speak about his book, Shut Out, The Game That Did Not Love Me Black. Growing up, Bernie had an exceptional passion and talent for hockey, playing at the college level for Western Michigan University before joining the Quebec Nordiques in the National Hockey League. Despite these successes, he would eventually leave hockey for the corporate sector when the racism he experienced from spectators, coaches, and other players became overwhelming. Shutout is a hopeful and uplifting book about facing adversity, overcoming it, and moving ahead from a player whose love of the sport was often unrequited. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Rico Phillips. Rico is a lifelong resident of Flint, Michigan, where he enjoyed a 28-year career as a professional firefighter with the City of Flint Fire Department, retiring in 2019. His second passion has been hockey since high school. Having roles as an athletic trainer, player, and coach, he has worked as an on-ice official since 1986. During his expansive hockey career, he founded and has been the director of the Flint Inner City Youth Hockey Program, where barrier-free hockey is offered to under-indexed children within the community. His work led him to be awarded the prestigious Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award by the National Hockey League in 2019. Rico is currently the Director of Cultural Diversity and Inclusion for the Ontario Hockey League. He also serves on the advisory committee for the Hockey Diversity Alliance, as well as Hockey Equality. He is also a member of the NHL Coaches Association BIPOC program. Rico is married and has 3 children and 1 grandchild. Please join me in welcoming Bernie Saunders and Rico Phillips.
Thank you so much. And wow, when I was asked to give a bio, I didn't realize how long that would sound last. But I do want to say one quick thing. I've added another grandchild to that, so I just want to make the record straight. Bernie, what an honor to meet you tonight. How are you today?
I'm doing good, and thank you very much for having me.
I think for a person like me who's a hockey purist who really not just wants to watch the game, but understand the game, understand its roots, however you would like to say it best. But anyways, I've looked at the history of hockey, and I've obviously being a person of color, a Black man myself, I went way back in the roots and really found out about the colored hockey league of the Maritimes and to learn about the steps that were made to be able to pave way for a person like me to play and enjoy the sport. And then little did I know there was a person named Bernie Saunders out there, and I feel bad that I didn't know until I had the opportunity to find out about your book and read your book. And that's no disrespect to you at all, sir. No, none at all. I think it has to do with the era in which I started watching hockey and the era in which you probably have left hockey. But one thing I wanted to let you know is that it's a complete honor to meet you and welcome you here tonight to speak with me.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor for me to be here. It's interesting, Rico, because that's one of the subjects I want to talk about, because one of the impetus for me to write the book was the feeling that the hockey society in itself doesn't even understand its own history. And by that, I mean, you again won the Willie Award, and congratulations. That's a high honor.
Thank you.
But what I write about in the book is fast forwarding to my life, is that hockey basically tabs Willie Reed to being the Jackie Robinson of hockey. And again, I don't want to say anything negative about Willie Reed. He's a great man and one of my heroes too. But one of the things people don't understand in terms of hockey history is that hockey did not follow the baseball model. By that I mean is that when Jackie Robinson came, yes, he was the first, and so that parallels Willie Reed, and I am fully in sync with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger accomplishment for Jackie Robinson was it was a door-opening event.
Yes.
So when he played, other Blacks played, like Larry Doby played, and three other Blacks played that same year.
Mm-hmm.
That became a door-opening event for other Blacks to play.
Right.
And to me, that's the more significant aspect of his life. With Willie Reed, Rico, he played in 1958. The Boston Bruins, played for a year and a half, and it was really kind of quiet, some things in the press and whatnot. But it was 16 years later until the next Black player played. And so one of the reasons why I wrote the book was I was one of those first Blacks that came after Willie Reed. And when we came, nobody had heard of Willie Reed.
Yeah.
We have now, because he's won all these awards, he's been celebrated now. But when I came in a lot of ranks, in a lot of instances, I was the first Black player that anybody had seen. And that my story was, the racial, confrontations that resulted from those experiences.
Yeah, so we can say that during Willie Reed's era, it certainly didn't make an emphasis on him being a Black player in the sport. I mean, from what I understand from reading his book and from knowing his story, is that it was just a small article in paper, so that never gave people like you and people in between you and him, should I say, the opportunity to look up and say, wow, he did that, I can too. So you and your brother were on this island coming into the sport in the sense of trying to make it on the big format, the big show.
Yeah, and most importantly, and this is what I tried to put into the book, was just the reception that it received, because it was brutal. You'll hear an incident of a racial affront here and a racial affront there. For me, it was just multiple times all throughout the game, because people were just shocked to see a person of color on the ice. And so for that reason, what I call the 16-year gap, I think that hockey history has to be rethought. And I'm not trying to draw attention to myself. The second person, Mike Marson, came in 1974. Bill Riley came in 1974 as well. And once again, it was just brutal at those points in time. And I believe those two deserve much greater recognition kind of from the annals of history than they're currently receiving, which is pretty much nothing.
So a question about that era of time. Do you believe with the strife that was happening in the US during the 60s, the racial strife, do you think that maybe that was one of the reasons that came into play as to why an owner of a team wouldn't allow for a Black person to even play in the US? I mean, is that hard to say?
I don't, it's hard to say, but I don't think it was so much that I think the dearth of Blacks in NHL had a lot to do with the fact that there weren't a lot of Blacks playing.
Yeah.
So Willie Reed made it, Mike Marson made it to the top. What I speak to more about is just the cold reception that we received when we got there. And the thing that just perplexed me, and it still perplexes me, Rico, is that I always understood that I was a visual anomaly. Think of this Black skin, and you put on a white hockey helmet, and you're skating around on that white ice and whatnot, and people look down and see a Black person for the first time. it's a visual anomaly, and I accept that, and I always did. But what I never understood was just the bitterness, the hatred. Like, just because I'm different, why does it mean that you have to hate me? And you go into these visiting rinks, and people are spitting at you and yelling the N-word and all this vile stuff to you. I never really understood that. You understand that when you're going to take on some things like that, but the hatred just was just so unnecessary in my opinion.
Sounds overwhelming.
Yeah.
Hard to even fathom that, to be honest with you, even though I personally dealt with it, but never to that extent. Of course, I wasn't on a stage like that ever in my life either, but that's incredible. So I want to allow the audience that's here to tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where were you born and raised?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Montreal. Everybody else in my family were born in Toronto.
Oh,
But we crisscrossed back and forth from Montreal to Toronto twice in our lives. And so my brother and my sister were born in Toronto. I was born in Montreal. And the question that I always got through my career is, why did you play hockey? And the simple answer, I was a Canadian. I played all the sports.
yeah.
But Saturday night we'd be glued to that television watching Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And just fell in love with the game like every other Canadian. So kind of the laughable part about my life is that I just grew up as a Canadian and was in love with hockey, but I didn't see myself as a black hockey player. I just saw myself as a hockey player. But the higher I rose kind of in the hockey echelon, the more the color of my skin became the prominent, discussion point.
When you think about being a kid and just being innocent in the sport, I mean, from what I understand from reading, you were about 4 years old when you started playing.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned your parents, Bernie Sr. and your mother, who you affectionately known as Hurricane Molly, which you had some incredible stories. But also you talked about, Gail and John, your siblings. What was it like, when I'm trying to picture myself, of course, not growing up in Canada, and those that are growing up in today's world. What was it like growing up in Toronto in your era of time?
Like anybody else, my childhood, I feel like was a regular childhood. It's interesting. People always ask me to compare the United States versus Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe the Canadians are more accepting. I live in South Carolina right now, and it's still can be difficult living down here. But our childhood was just a normal childhood, and we just went through the school ranks. There wasn't a lot of name calling other than when we played in hockey.
Mm.
You knew that you're black, you knew that you're different. You never fully accepted kind of into these circles type of thing. So you knew you're different, but I never felt any venom or vile from people. I feel that in all the neighborhoods we lived in, and there were several, that it was just a normal Canadian childhood where you kind of went to school, and after school you went to the hockey rink and skated until the lights went out, and then went home and did it all over again.
So, I'm wondering, considering my own experience, and other, I've been fortunate, I guess you would say, or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, to counsel with minor league hockey players across both countries and across North America, I guess you could say, that have been the victims of marginalization, hate speech, hate actions. And one of the things that crosses their mind is the feeling of loneliness, like how when they go to the hockey rink, everything changes amongst, how it feels when you come to a hockey rink compared to, when you're at school or in your everyday life. Did you experience that difference as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Rico, because the answer is yes, but it increased over time. Like the higher I would ascend that hockey ladder, the more lonely I became. When playing house league, probably it wasn't a big deal. Everybody's a house league player trying to make it. Then you get into travel hockey, it's more aggressive, and so you start to feel some racial abuse there, and then your teammates don't understand it, and you start to feel like an island. But so the answer is yes, but it was really sad when I made it to the pros, because when you make it to the pros, you go all through all this other stuff that other players didn't have to go through, and
Yeah.
you had nobody to talk to. I said in another interview, it was interesting, as I think retrospectively how I handled this stuff. When I was as high as playing college hockey, I kind of befriended the newspaper reporter, because he initially wrote an article about this, my experiences, and he would always travel with the team. And so after the game, if something would happen, I wouldn't talk to my teammates, but I'd say talk to him, and he'd ask me what happened and type of thing. And so he helped me a little bit, and wrote a lot of articles about it, but not even your coaches could understand it. There's a scene in the book where I was playing in Halifax, and I went through abuse in my own locker room, and my coach came out to console me. And I got to say, he cared about me, and he was doing his best. But in so doing, because he didn't know how to handle this, he's kind of ruined the scene type of thing. So because that became an island, and you just never talk about it. There's people that there's teammates that now have read my book. They're kind of astounded at some of the things that I went through, because I wouldn't go to them, because I didn't want to be disruptive. And the other thing that the players go through that you can probably associate with Rico is that when you're on a team, especially a hockey team, you just want to be a part of the whole. You just want to be on the team.
Right.
And so you don't want to draw that attention to yourself.
Right.
You might take some views from the stands or whatever was the incident of that day. But if you call attention to the incident, you're calling attention to yourself. And, that kind of disrupts the team concept. And so, unfortunately, most of the players, and I'm sure this is true today, just suffer in silence. You just have to take it and try to be above it.
There's no question. That's one of my specific task within my role, is to allow players to understand that I'm there for them as a person and not them as a player. And it's because of that. Police officers use it. Firefighters, we all have our code that we have. Like, right. We just don't, we protect each other. And even under those circumstances, their protection is for the wrong reasons and the wrong way. And they don't understand the impact. And what you're expressing is the impact of this verbal bullying that it had on you mentally, and how it really just eroded away who you started becoming as a person. Is the way I read through the book. I can't tell you exactly, I'm not a sociologist, but reading the book, I was so gripped and enthralled in your story. And I want to remind our audience, it's called Shutout, the game that did not love me black. I'm sorry, I almost messed that up. The game that did not love me black. It can be checked out at both Halton Hills library, and certainly you can find it online if you want to have your own copy of it. But I was so grateful to read it, because I was able to capture a sense of how you must have felt. So I think a word that you used that was important is empathy. It's a book about empathy, and expressing to our audience what that means to you. Like, what is that your inspiration for writing this book?
Yeah, it really is, because hockey goes through incidents almost every year, and I never really feel that they fully get it. And so I just wanted the hockey community to understand what it's like to be, kind of in my skates, because, if you read the story, it's the story of this shy kid that, was kind of afraid of the world, but the only way that he found to deal with the world was through this sport, was through hockey. And it gave me confidence and success and all the things that kind of made me into a stronger man later. And so I was diligent with this game. I worked harder than most people. I kind of introduced some training techniques that weren't being done back in the day, and weightlifted and did all these things. And so when I made it to the mountain, so to speak, I was ultra prepared. Like some people have asked me, Bernie, how did you feel when you made it to the NHL? And the honest answer, Rico, is I felt like that's where it was supposed to be because I had planned for it for so long, and I just loved the game. And then when I made it to the top of the mountain, I was rejected. I was just, and it wasn't just one thing. It was the verbal stuff. It was violence on the ice. It was stuff in my own locker room. I think everywhere I turned, the color of my skin became the center of attention. And I go into the Quebec Nordiques training camp my first year, and I tore it up. Actually, my second year, I tore it up. I was the leading goal scorer in training camp, and the media all over me, and I just felt like this is, I'm going to be a star in the NHL, and we're just launching my career. And they sent me to the minors, and I was just devastated. And it became this big controversy in Quebec City about, why did they send Bernie Saunders to the minors type of thing. And I was devastated, and unfortunately, as the story goes, I never recovered from that. I just never recovered. I had a shot later, and I did kind of mediocre in my second shot, but I never recovered from that. And so I want the reader to understand empathetically what that's like to love something and work so hard at it your entire life and achieve a high level of success and then be rejected. Is what the story is about. Just be completely rejected is such a sad thing. And I don't want other people, especially people of color, to go with that. I'm hoping that the people and the system and the players and whatnot will be more accepting than it was back in 1980 when I arrived on the scene.
I would suggest that you paved a way for a lot of people to not have to endure the level that you're doing. I'm not suggesting for a moment that they're not still facing levels of systemic racism in their lives. And we can all agree or disagree on that, but I think you and I would agree that that still exists in this world, and it's alive and well. And that's what causes folks to not to work so hard and not be able to achieve what they ultimately plan to achieve. Yeah. And so it's important for those of us that are around, I often tell people that want to know how they can help. What can they do? They're not a person of color. How can they help? And one thing I suggest, and I believe I've seen you suggest the same thing, is to become an advocate by understanding, like gaining this empathy of what that would feel like. And so that's what really locked me into the book as something I could share with others for a reason for them to really dive in deeper. I did have a question for you, though, about writing books, because I've often wondered what that would be like. It takes some bravery, to be honest with you, from the way I look at it. But for a person that's contemplating writing a book of memoirs, how did the process begin for you? Like, what made you say, okay, this is it, I'm going to do it? And how did you go about that?
Rico, I'm the type of person that just puts pen to paper because the best way to write is to write. My brother passed away, and he wrote a book, and this whole idea had been kind of in my background. And probably there's several thoughts or reasons why I did it, but the main one was I'm a father, and two of my sons played hockey, and I saw them go through some similar things that I went through, and you probably feel the same way is when something happens to me, I can take it. But when something happens to one of my sons, it really, really bothers me. And so I wanted to do something to add to the conversation, the hockey conversation on this subject. And so I just put pen to paper. And fortunately, I kept a lot of my newspaper clippings and articles and whatnot. So the research process was really easy for me because I just went to my box of old clippings and validated it and verified it, most things. The interesting thing I would say on this subject, though, Rico, is I don't think I would do it again, the same way on this subject, because I'm very disappointed where I see a lot of comments or reactions to the book where people think that this is this guy that's complaining about, whining about his failed NHL career. And I think the reason for that is because as I wrote the book, in order to be credible, I have to establish that I was a good hockey player.
Right.
So you have to almost brag or talk some positive. I try to do it with statistics, but
Right.
you have to kind of build yourself up so that the reader understands that that this was a legitimate hockey player.
Right.
In so doing, the reaction that a lot of people I see is that they misconstrue the story to be more about me crying about why I didn't make it to the NHL, and that couldn't be further more from the truth. I took lessons from hockey, I applied them to business. I had a great life, but I wanted just to come back to hockey and say, this is what it was like, especially in that time frame in the 80s. And like I said at the outset, something as simple as Willie O'Ree, they don't understand that when Mike Morrison and Bill Riley came in, they were really the Jackie Robinsons because nobody had seen a black hockey player before. Nobody. And once again, Willie has great accomplishments, and I don't want to denigrate those, but it was so tough during that period that people don't understand that. So like I said, I just put pen to paper, but in retrospect, I think I probably should have done it. I had somebody else write it as a biography about me, so that when you have to talk about yourself, people don't just see it as writers' hubris, as people saw it. When a third party says it, it comes across a lot differently. And because of that, I think my message got misconstrued, which is very disappointing to me because I wanted to make an impact in terms of the, hockey conversation on race.
Well, that's an incredible insight. I mean, quite honestly, I think that commends a lot of attention, because I would have never thought of it in those terms. Of course, I read your book, and I wasn't looking to for any fault in you or fault. I wanted to understand what you were going through. You said it very early on. It's a book about empathy, so I took it that way.
Yeah, okay.
We will always know those people will be out there that want to look for every reason, but that's the same reason why Akeem Ayu is so broadcast so negatively. I mean, he is. If he says anything right now, the naysayers say it's because he had a failed career, not because he has a serious view of and perspective on the world of hockey, and that's short-sighted, of course.
Yeah, that's too bad, but that's my experiences as well.
So you open the book, and I know we're kind of bouncing a little bit, but it's perfect. It's organic to the way I'd like to have the discussion go. You open the book with a cutting-edge view of what it's like for you as a Black player as you journey through professional hockey, including the NHL, which was in the 80s, as you indicated. It resonates with people of color who had similar struggles. Is there a way to express how far the sport of hockey has had to come, be more accepting, and more importantly, do you feel as though we are doing what it takes to appropriately continue the movement? I know that's a tough one.
Well, I get long-winded on this one because it's such a tough comment or subject, and I have different viewpoints because I have to say, Rico, we live in democratic societies, and so I don't believe in things like taking hockey players and doing diversity education as a standpoint. To me, it's kind of a socialist thing. If a person wants to be a racist in a democratic society, you have to allow them to be a racist type of thing. You don't train them to do what you want. And so I know a lot of leagues do that, and I am firmly against that. But what I'm for is just strict punishment, for offenders, and there should be due process and whatnot, so that the person has a chance to kind of vet their experiences. But in my opinion, the best way to handle this, and I write about this in the book, is that when I played junior B under Sherry Basson, who was with the Erie Otters for years, ran that program. Sherry was my coach. And again, you have this shy kid that was a pretty good hockey player playing for Sherry. We're playing in the Belleville Arena. It's packed because the game has playoff implications. And so it's a really important game. And the racism is raining down on me, like it always did back in the 80s. And Sherry stops the game, stops the game. And the referee comes over and says, Coach Basson, you got to either put your players on the ice or you're going to have to forfeit the game. And Sherry says, he says, we're not playing another minute unless this one person, racist, is thrown out of the rink. And I'm just staring down at my skate laces because the whole focal point, once again, is on me. I'm just this young kid. Rico, I just want to play the game that I love. I just want to show up and play hard and play hockey. But every time you go into an opposing rink, they see this black skin, and it's always about me with this racism. Long story short, they threw the person out of the rink, and the game continued. So when I see things happen in the NHL or other places, to me, that's the model. I think that it shouldn't just be the person of color dealing with the racism. It should be the environment. In the book, I say it should be a we problem. So it should be their teammates, it should be the coaches, it should be the management, and so on and so forth. But in too many instances, the person of color is just left to deal with it on their own. And that's why, going back to one of your original questions, is that's why we feel like we're on an island, because we have to deal with these things ourselves. But it's such a difficult topic that a lot of the other things that leagues do, they sound nice, and it's something where they kind of check a box, but I don't think they're effective, and I don't think they're the way to go. I just think that if you play in a league and you use certain phrases and you're convicted of it, then you get a severe suspension. And if you're a two-time offender, then you get a lifetime suspension. I would deal with that, but I just don't believe, Rico, that you can change what's in a person's heart or what's in a person's mind.
Yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways on that. And obviously, with my workload, I'd tell you that some of it's different. But what I try to do, and just so you understand, like how a person like me, I'm, you better believe I'm on an island. So I'm just going to be frank. I work for the Ontario Hockey League. Not only am I the only American that works for the league, but I'm the only person of color that works for the league, and quite possibly the first of both. Now, I didn't tell you that because that's a monumental moment that I want to celebrate. I'm saying that the struggle is real. And by that, I mean that I have to be careful not to make the world's problems my problems because I'm a person of color in hockey, right? What I try to do, though, is exemplify that you can think whatever you want to think, but have the emotional maturity to not say those things that you think. Like you said, I can't say you came from whatever and however you was raised, but that's not going to be acceptable in our sport. Never has been. There's going to be a standard. And if you go above that standard or below that standard, excuse me, then you're not going to play. You're not being a part of it. That's the part that's not taking part yet, though.
Yeah.
Like we do this thing before the games where you see Rico Phillips. Hi, I'm the director of cultural diversity inclusion. Please don't say naughty words. I mean, it's basically what I'm saying.
Wow.
But when I speak to the staff, I say, have you prepared your staff for someone does use a homophobic slur? And that's where it stops. So I'm going to continue to grow, and it's based off comments and perspectives like yours that say, hey, what we're doing isn't working. Trying to pussyfoot through it and make somebody think a different way isn't as effective as saying we're going to hold you accountable. That's how you're going to know that if you come here, you're going to be held accountable. I think that's what you're saying. Is that correct?
That's very correct and well stated. Yes.
Great. One more eye-opening thing was in the first chapters, and also chapter 32, Friendly Fires, when you revealed the savagery of the evil work, but not only from your opponents, but from your own teammates. So while it's difficult to understand the immense heartache, what would you offer a young player today who may be facing some of the same challenges?
Again, I'm a little bit off center when I make these comments, because I don't have any faith kind of in the hockey community. I think it's improved. There's been incremental improvement, but I still believe that it's lurking. Racism is lurking in the background, and so I would say to a young person that if you want to play hockey, you have to understand that. That's where you chose to go. I chose to live in South Carolina, and so you should go with an informed choice. And so if and when something happens, you can't be shocked, because hockey just hasn't progressed far enough. The reverse, Rico, is that I'm kind of against. There's this programs where leagues go to inner city spots and try to attract Black players, kids into the game. And I'm against that too, because I think you have to first change the game before you attract somebody into something where they can be brutalized, type of thing. To me, it's almost cruel to do that. So going back to your question, if you got a kid that just loves this game as you and I did, then I think they should go in with an informed mind, and obviously do the things that you're doing, Rico, and try to change it from within. But you should be not shocked when things happen to you, because if you're such a minority in this game, eventually something is going to happen. And like my experience, the further you go up that ladder, the more difficult it's going to become. And so you have to understand that your chosen profession, and kind of deal with it. Sadly, I've kind of stepped away. I fought, the battles when I was playing, and I fought battles when I was coaching my sons. But once again, I really respect people like you that are still fighting the battle, because hockey has a long way to go, and it's not going to change unless somebody like you steps up and keeps fighting the battles for us.
I appreciate that. One of the things that we try to focus on is ways to knock down the barriers. So thinking of that, are there ways that would make the sport of hockey more attractive to players of color in both countries? I mean, is there something that other than, like we talk about the blatant racism that occurs, is there a way that maybe we change the tables, we flip the tables, we become more and more people of color are involved in the sport, and so then there's less occurrences of racism? Is there a way to encourage more, or what can we do, for a person like me, or a person that's watching it's at the grassroots level, thinking, is there an end goal, or are we just struggling for no good reason from your perspective?
No, I don't think you're struggling. I think that it's just a long-term process that's going to take a long time. There's been changes. Obviously, it's a lot different today than it was when I played in 1980, and so there has been progress, and we have to respect and celebrate that. But the perfect example I use is PK Subban.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he first came to the league, this kid had talents to change the game. He had that personality, and he had a different style, but that's okay. Wayne Gretzky came in with a different style, and Bobby Orr came with a different style, and those other players. But when PK came in with his different style, all they wanted to do was kind of shut him up and tap him back. And I think that had they basically molded the system around him, it didn't have to be in Montreal, because Montreal is so conservative, but within his career, that kid could have been, that light that just shone on the league and just drew, more blacks to it. Because to me, that's what it's going to take. Mm-hmm. is a Tiger Woods type of experience where yeah, this hockey is a cool game, and it's welcoming to blacks, and so on and so forth. Um, and so I think they blew their opportunity with PK Subban because I thought he had so much potential, and eventually, again, I don't watch a lot of hockey, but when he's playing for the New Jersey Devils and whatnot in his career, it wasn't even the same player. It was almost like because he was afraid to make a mistake, and he himself and so on and so forth. And he retires with what I call a mediocre career, but I think he could have been just lights out and really open the NHL to the broader audience. People in Canada and places where you are, hockey is a big thing. I live in South Carolina.
Right.
Hockey is nothing here. It's nothing here. And until it expands to a bigger population, I just think it's going to remain this, I call it a boutique or a regional game where people who go into the boutique love it. People who go to hockey games love it, but it's not a Walmart or or Costco. Football, baseball are Costco and Walmart, and hockey is just a small boutique that some people like. But I think it's going to take a superstar experience like that in order for it to kind of really open the floodgates.
You made a very interesting point with your analogy. It was an excellent analogy, being that even in Flint, Michigan, where hockey has been here since 1969, it's still not the wildly popular sport that you would expect.
Yeah.
In Flint, Michigan, I have a program for absolutely free for kids between the ages of 11. I have 30 free slots. That includes transportation, equipment, training, the whole nine. All they have to do is commit to be there. And I rarely get 20 kids.
Yeah.
So it tells you the connection is not there within certain demographics and communities here in U.S. in particular. Canada looks a lot differently, obviously, but there's new immigrants in Canada. And so it's kind of very similar in that sense. Like if you look at a town like Mississauga, who has a heavy Middle Eastern population, and they're not attracted to hockey at all. But yet they have an OHL team right in their front yard, basically. And so it's just a perfect example of how demographics get set aside when it comes to elitist sports, which is what some would consider hockey.
Yeah.
So midway through the book, you take us to your journey to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I got to speak it up just because that's my birthplace. I can't say it's my hometown. I was born there, but my parents were visiting. But Kalamazoo, Michigan, it is a real place. For those of you that are wondering, is that a real place? But what was the transition like coming from Canadian brand of hockey to the American brand?
It's really disappointing because that year was really a setup year. I was so distraught with the way my experiences went with the Nordiques that I walked away from my third year of my 3-year contract because I just felt that it wasn't being treated properly, and I had an education from Western Michigan University, which is in Kalamazoo. I spent there 4 years there, so I knew that if as I was leaving hockey in the NHL, if I got back to Kalamazoo, where I'm in the Hall of Fame at Western Michigan University and I'm known all over town, I knew if I got back to Kalamazoo, I could probably get a good job based off of basically my name, my marketing appeal, and that's essentially what happened. Was I on my own negotiated a buyout for my NHL contract. Maurice Fillion was the general manager at the time, and I went right to him and says, Maurice, I'm done with this. I want out of this. And then I went back and signed with JP LeBlanc in Kalamazoo. And so it was like going from NHL baseball, going like the pros in baseball to A ball almost, where it was like a big dive, disappointing dive for me. And it was just a real difficult struggle because it was the only year I played hockey at all without the intent of going to the NHL, that this was leaving the NHL. And so emotionally it was difficult. But from a Kalamazoo perspective, it was a homecoming because, again, I had gone 4 years to Western Michigan University. And I stayed there in the summertime and whatnot. And so people knew me. I was kind of a big fish in a small pond there. And so it was the right thing for me to do. And I did subsequently get a job with a local pharmaceutical company, and I never looked back. And so I have no regrets.
That is awesome. I love that our state gave you a great place to call home too for a while too. It's beautiful. In the book, you shared some wonderful pictures of you as well as your family, including your 3 sons, as well as your friends and teammates, your girlfriend, Pam. And one picture stood out to me, and it was your goal, Sally. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, that was in Kalamazoo. And so, again, I was never a player, Rico, to draw attention to myself, because once again, I was always hyper aware that I'm the black guy out there.
Wow.
And so kind of the antithesis of PK Subban, who tried to draw attention his way and his infamous scoring celebrations. I was a goal scorer, but when I would score, I would barely even raise my stick. I would basically, okay, let's go back and line up and start over again, because I did not want to draw attention to myself. And I did that throughout my career. But my last year, again, when I was so disappointed with my experience in the NHL, emotionally, I was just saddened, because I knew I was leaving the game. And so as a way of quietly protesting for myself, when I scored a goal, I would raise my fist in the Black Power salute, as opposed to raising my hand and my stick. I raised my stickless glove in the Black Power salute, and happily, because again, I didn't want to make a big thing of it. I did it for myself. Nobody understood what I was doing, so it never made press or whatever. But I put the picture in the book because I have several celebrations from that year from my clip notes that show that. So I just wanted to show the reader that that's exactly what I did to quietly protest my experiences with more the NHL and my previous experience in hockey.
For me, it was an incredible, like I said, it stood out to me. When I was fortunate enough to be on the NHL award stage, receive my award, I ended my speech with my wrist down. Believe me, I snatched it back down because I said, "Oh man, what did I just do here?" Because I'm just a guy from Flint, Michigan,
Right.
But
Right.
it was well received in the long run by the people that it needed to be received from. So it inspired me to see it in the book, and I just wanted to make sure readers understand that you're going to get a real glimpse into Bernie Saunders' life as a hockey player.
Can I ask you a question about that, Rico? Because
Sure.
Because again, I'm estranged from hockey. I don't even watch anymore. And you're out there fighting the good fight. I really commend you for that. But from afar, what I experienced, I'll use the example. The NHL goes through this big process where they say we're doing all this diversity stuff, and they talk about intentionality and how they're going to become more inclusive and whatnot. And the first sign of trouble, they always snip back down. And the perfect example is when they said they're going to basically hire more people of color in the front office and whatnot, and do it proactively, prospectively. And Governor Ron DeSantis says, "Oh, this is wokeism," and says something about that. And immediately they back down. To me, that's disappointing, because if you want to do something with intentionality, then there's going to be some rough waters, that there's going to be some detractors and whatnot. And it kind of says to me, the message to me is that we don't really believe this stuff. We do it because it feels good, but we don't really believe this stuff. That's how I feel. I was wondering how you feel about similar circumstances.
Well, it's an excellent question. And I can tell you that we have teams, most of our teams have some level of a cause awareness in the OHL. And one of the things that I try to express is that if you're going to have a cause awareness of anything that has to do with marginalized groups of people in particular, is that you have a real, true, genuine connection to that community. So you don't have Pride Night and say, "Hey, everybody that's gay and lesbian in the community, come on out because we're having Pride Night tonight." No, you invite that community leadership, those that make up the the infrastructure of that community one way or another, to be at the table, and we call that inclusion, to making plans to make sure that it's, like I say, authentic in its approach.
Yeah.
We don't want just we have rainbow sticks on our tape on our sticks if we really don't have a connection to that community. So to give you an example, here in Flint, Michigan, at the Flint Firebirds of the OHL, they don't practice they don't host a Pride Night because they don't have a direct connection with the LGBTQ plus community. But 30 miles north of here, half hour north of here, is the Saginaw Spirit of the OHL. They do have a connection with the Saginaw Bay Area Pride group, I think is what they're referred to as. And so they do have a Pride Night, and it has their imprint on that night. So it isn't just bringing out their fans, but it gives out a tangible connection to fandom so that those fans want to come back in the future.
Wow.
So as far as I look at it, is I don't want check boxes. We do certain things at the league level, but at the team level, my support goes more into, let's make sure that it's a genuine connection. So if you're having Indigenous Awareness Night, you connect with that Indigenous community. You don't just invite them out to watch the game because that's monetary, and that's not what we're all about. So that's how I view it, and I wish and I hope that the NHL and the AHL and all the other professional leagues, take the same view. Like, don't have a Pride Night, because all that does is creates this groundswell of negativity that's unnecessary.
Exactly. Well put. Well put.
So I know we're getting close to the end here. I just want to talk real briefly, Natalie, if you don't mind. The final chapter is dedicated to your brother. Can you see his legacy continue to thrive today? People that don't know that understand that John Saunders, in the U.S. in particular, but also in Canada, was a figure in ESPN. When I first started watching ESPN, I was enthralled that he was there, first of all. And when I found out he was a Western Michigan Bronco, I seen a picture of him playing. I couldn't believe it, because this was years after he basically had stardom here. And I did not realize he was a hockey player. And so I knew there was a connection. But can you see his legacy continue to thrive today?
I think so, and I hope so. I look at it from two regards. From a broadcasting standpoint, my brother wonderfully in his last, 5-6 years, became a ambassador for people of color in broadcasting and at ESPN. And actually, they had him put it as part of his job description, because he was so devoted to this subject. And so because of that, I still hear from famous people that tell me, your brother did this for me or did that for me, type of thing, and it always brings a tear to my eye. And so I certainly believe in the broadcasting field that will hang true. He obviously didn't make it beyond college hockey as a hockey player, but when you talk about hockey and look at the Saunders brother, we're one. We both. I actually, for his 60th birthday, I put in this book, I commissioned a young Black artist to do an oil painting of my brother in his Ryerson jersey, which is his highest level of success, and me in my Nordiques jersey, which is my highest level of success. Because, and I call it we're hugging each other like somebody scored a goal. And I call it a celebration of life, because independent of all this other stuff we're talking about, the reason why he made it so far in his profession, I did well in my profession in pharmaceuticals, was through hockey. And so we both love the game. Although I'm estranged, I still love the game, and I want the best for the game. And the same for my brother. So I think his legacy will be continued through that feeling, because we're both so successful in life, purely because, in my case, this shy young kid was kind of, brought to life because of this game that we both fell in love with.
Awesome. That's awesome. Would you like me to turn it back over to you all, or?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a couple questions, so I want to make sure we get to them before our time is up together. But Elisa, if you want to help read out some of those questions.
Absolutely. So we have some questions from the Good Enoughs. Thank you for sending these in. Our first question is directed at Rico. Is there ever a point where books such as Bernard's could be used for educational purposes or assigned reading for up-and-comers in the field, different areas, perhaps coaches, etc.?
Yeah, to answer that question, yes. And I believe not just because I was interested in Bernie's story, but because it tells stories of struggle, perseverance, identity, self-identity, identifying where you are in the world and making tough decisions under tough circumstances. So I believe there's many life lessons in this book. It is not a book strictly about hockey, if you ask me. It's just hockey is the vehicle that tells the, unfortunately, it's an ugly story at sometimes, but I think there's triumph at the end that Bernie brings through to, he's true to himself. And I think that's what that matters the most. That's what I got out of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Rico. And our second question is directed at Bernie. We're wondering in the audience, what took you from Canada to living in South Carolina?
Oh, it's kind of a weird story. I actually left Canada in 1975 to go to Western Michigan University and play for the Broncos under a hockey scholarship. And just as life would have it, I just never came back. I still love Canada, feel my Canadian roots. But after my hockey career, which ironically was for the Nordiques, which was in Canada, I started working in the pharmaceutical industry for a company now is defunct, but it was called the Upjohn Company. And I just kind of climbed the corporate ladder with them, and eventually they moved us to New Jersey. And so we relocated there, and that was kind of nice because my brother lived close by, and so I was close to my brother when he was still alive. Then most recently, I talked about in my book, I've become a caregiver to my girlfriend who had a really severe stroke in 2016. And so I've become like a 24/7 caregiver, and she has family in South Carolina. So I moved here to be closer to her family so that they can, help with her assistance, with her care.
All right, so it looks like those are all our questions for tonight. On behalf of everyone here at the Halton Hills Public Library, I wanted to thank both Bernie Saunders and Rico Phillips for joining us tonight, and have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.